of Ash and Flo. This is Unbillable Hours, a podcast about professional services marketing. Stick around to listen to our insights, tips, and best practices to improve your firm's marketing and even your career.
Welcome, Ash. Welcome, everybody, to this new episode of the Unbillable Hours podcast. I think we had a series of quite great guests back there a little bit.
Yeah, we
but
did.
Today,
Yeah,
today it's just you and me again. Taking a little break from the guest interviews, and we want to talk about, because you got some questions around measurement and measuring success in marketing and how to do that. We wanted to break that down a bit, or maybe even demystify it a little bit more.
Yeah.
We've done a scorecard episode a while back, right? But I think
you can always check the scorecard episode to know more about like measurements and metrics. But right now on that particular note, we got to touch on like the leading and lagging indicators and things like that, because that's much more relevant when you're connecting your marketing and sales funnels. But I think we had like a brief rant. Right?
Yeah, we wanted to do a brief rant, and that's just a refresher that at least we hope, and where we sit is certainly true. Ethical marketing or ethics in marketing is still a thing.
Yeah,
and people should remember it. And I say should remember it because I think with the terrible war going on in Ukraine, and then somewhat weirdly with lighter news like the International Women's Day, we see a pattern emerge that we know from before. I think we had similar issues around Black Lives Matter movements in the US and so forth. And I think this always really upsets me, or saddens me, I don't know what the right word is, because you just see so many firms and businesses from all industries, but I will explicitly call it firms here because that is a thing, that hop onto these things for quick social media or marketing wins. And that just, I don't know what your view here is, Ash, but coloring your logo in blue and yellow, if you talk about the war in Ukraine, your social media profile icon, if you are a person, totally fine. Express your worries, express
individual
your empathy.
Views, yeah.
It's a human thing to do, show your support. If you're a brand and you're backing that up with meaningful action to alleviate the suffering, fine. But just declaring how you stand with the victims in Ukraine without having any stakes in the conflict or doing anything about it, what does it even mean? What does it mean? Like if you post about how you stand with Black Lives Matter and then there's nothing on the back end of it, or I should be clear, or it's you do something and you sponsor some education initiative for Black young people, and it's like 0.005 cent on the dollar in revenue, like that's not meaningful to me, right? That's just a vain gesture. I think whenever I see that, what's a good word? It's despicable to me, honestly, especially in context of the Ukraine conflict. You still have people dying, and then you post some meaningless BS to make this war about you. I mean, it's not the fucking Super Bowl, right? You don't build brand likability by cheering for a team. That's not what this is. And sorry, that's the end of my version of the rant. That's people have to remember.
Yeah. Well, okay. So there's mindful marketing that's happening in the sense that if like companies saying, hey, you don't want to get messages about Mother's Day. Hey, you don't want to get messages about like some event or the other. So they want to pull you out of those marketing messages. That's fine. That's all right. But the thing we'd like to touch here is like, there's the conflict that's going on in Ukraine, essentially the invasion. There is, International Women's Day. There's other stuff. International Women's Day, something I would like to like bring to attention was
let's use that one, not the war, which is too horrible for me to even,
the bot. Like, so in the UK, where I am, basically the government makes companies disclose their gender pay gap. Someone created a bot that pretty much pulls this data and then tweets back at companies that basically just say, hey, we're doing everything to drive equality and blah, blah, blah. And then right at the end of these guys reply as a tweet saying, in your company, the wage gap between men and women is X%. And you see a lot of brands have like ridiculously awful percentages, but they push out these, unfortunately, sappy and crappy messages because there's no depth behind it. There's no meaning behind it. It's just like the marketing department pushing it out.
And I'd go even further, right? I'm not ready to make excuses here. If that's the firm's way of treating them, that's not just not helping, that makes you part of the problem, right?
Yes.
Talking up big game about X, climate change, equality, whatever it is, without doing anything means you are distracting. You're deliberately distracting people from the fact that you're not doing anything. That makes you very much a part of the problem, right?
And this definitely
there's a point in time where sharing funny tweets about equal rights and then your business practices look differently, where that's not very in terms of actions and results and actual impact on society. It's not very different from someone who says I'm against equal. Do you know what I mean? Like it's the same.
Essentially, let me put it this way. This is basically saying that, oh, I'm not homophobic. I have gay friends. I mean, okay. Fine. Like that doesn't really mean that you're
and
doing
then you post
anything
that every year. You post that every year on a dedicated day, but you never change your hiring policies.
Yeah,
or close the pay gap or whatever the equivalent is. I don't know where to take that example.
Yeah, I mean,
but that's the thing, right?
It's the thing that
Sorry, I just wanted to say this because Ash did a little bit of digging in the data, and we're not going to call out specific names or anything. People can do this stuff on their own time, but you might find firms, if you use the UK data, who have been posting on International Women's Days on LinkedIn, right? Mornings, 8:00 for 3, 4, 5 years straight. And the pay gaps in those firms have not closed. And that's the point.
Being closed.
That is,
it's like,
and that is the thing. But there's a lot of that. And I don't know if we can maybe end the rant here. If that's your situation and you're in marketing of a firm, we sympathize with the pressures you're under, right? Everybody gets that email from the partner. What do we post on International Women's Day? But I think there's an opportunity for all of us here to push back on that as much as it goes, right? And to reply to that email, well, what did we do? That I could post about. That would be a fun conversation to have.
I would basically say be genuine, honest, and empathetic about whatever you're posting. If your firm is not doing anything, you can still post on your personal accounts as leader or whatever, talking about your view, which is totally fine, saying that, or if you're a firm that wants to say something, we've tried, we've done this, it's gone so far, and there's still a lot to go. That's good. Don't just post like celebratory messages, just patting yourself in the back for practically doing nothing. That's the kind of stuff that really, really shouldn't. And make sure that your messages are human, not tone deaf. Like, why do you want, like, this thing happens, it's going on there, but is it on brand, and is it something that you actually have a stake in the ground for? If not, don't go ahead and just say something for the sake of saying something. Make it meaningful and make it actually make an impact. Otherwise, it's not just noise, as Flo said, but it's also the fact that
it's cynical and inhumane.
It's
cynical and inhumane. That's what I find it is. Sorry. Yeah. Especially so, and to be very clear, all you said, I think that's important to say again. It's totally fine to do that as a human being through personal channels. And if you feel you have the freaking need to, you can say, I, as the CEO of Super Consult Mega Inc., right, denounce violence in Eastern Europe. You could add that. I would ask you why, though? Why? Because how is that important to drag your brand into this apparently human statement you're making as a person? But everything we just said, that's for the brand channels and the branded communications from the firm as a whole, right? Which is not a human being, it's just a bunch of paper. And that's where you have to be prudent and careful. And when in doubt, just don't post, because honestly, like some of those messages I've seen around by firms denouncing the violence who've been working on government contracts of sometimes military varieties for years. Like I'm like, come on, guys. And I might be alone in this, but my recommendation to the listeners here is to just stay away from that stuff if you can. Anyways, I would say let's go to the measurement. No, from the lighter side.
The metrics and measurements bit.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's
so
you talked about leading and lagging indicators. Let's start. Or you know what? Let me preface it by saying, I have client conversations where firms come to me and say, well, we're hearing you guys talk about aligning marketing to revenue and how to measure that stuff. And can we do that tomorrow? And then I often look at them and say, well, you have just started to drive more strategic marketing efforts. Like that's the case with my clients. your tech stack is not even there. Like we're still working on implementing the CRM or whatever it is, right? So let's hold off a little bit because, and then I get into this discussion, which I'll let you have of, there's leading and lagging indicators. Revenue clearly is a lagging one. So it means by definition, right, you have to have done something for a little while there for it to work. So what's your take on the leading and the lagging indicators, or how to approach this?
Think about it this way. Like if you've got like a break-even point, but you'd probably be doing marketing before that. If you start like looking at your marketing efforts before you hit break even and you basically say, oh, I've been marketing, but I still haven't broken even, so I should stop marketing. That's ridiculous. In the same way, when you're trying to like start measuring the effectiveness of your marketing stuff, you need to like think about your entire life cycle of marketing, from like the thought leadership piece going out till, what do you say, to closing the deal, to closing, what do you say, the job, essentially.
Yeah.
Those different points. So at different points you take different measurements. So it's like, right, I put out a piece of thought leadership talking about like digital twin for like the industrial sector, for instance, and now I got a client who basically is interested in like improving their manufacturing process and stuff, and they want to use the technology that I was talking about. Cool. So I'm now in initial negotiations. Yes, you have like a mark there saying that this led to sales conversations, not sales conversion, sales conversations. That's like a metric that you can use and see how much that generates, because not all these conversations convert to like the initial sales pitch and the initial sales like stuff, because you're not essentially taking the entire deal. Like, so you basically start with like, okay, these generated X amount of sales conversations, which then converted to like X amount of initial deals, which then converted into full deals. This is like an entire year, few years or something for most companies. Unless your time to deal is literally, well, it's not happening anywhere right now. It's like a day or a month, which doesn't happen in real world. You should consider the fact that time to deal and time to revenue and time to, what do you say, implementation close as some indicators for you to start converting your marketing measurement to your sales measurements, because these need to be connected. Yes, but you can't really, rush it if, say, your time to deal, for instance, is like months.
And I think it's a good question to ask by my clients. It's good to think about the stuff early, but the way I explain it is you got to keep it feasible and pragmatic, and you got to sort of stagger it. Like if you start out to drive a more strategic marketing effort and you want to measure stuff, I would focus on two things in the beginning. Like first of all, I'd start with the mindset, because what are we doing here? We are measuring to improve the effectiveness of what we're doing over time. We're not measuring to prove it. That is important to me, because we went from industrialization to complete mass customization. Everybody has 2 cars and the planet is ruined with marketing. So there's no need to prove marketing works, right? We got it's very clear it does. What is important though, is to make sure yours continues to drive more and better results for the firm. So that's why we measure. That's where I would always start. So with that question in mind then, how do we improve? I think earliest stages, you do improve by measuring the stuff that is important as you begin. And to me, that is, you capture the cost of stuff you're doing. Most firms don't do that. So really, let's have a slot in place that says, okay, what do we have? Because most firms know what their budget is or their program spend. But for marketing costs, you got to add the salaries of your marketing people. Okay, easy enough. But then also you have to capture and assign the time your practitioners use up to support marketing efforts. So that could be one thing. And the other thing is just measure what matters, and that is consistency of effort and some sort of quality. So I just literally track, do we push out content on LinkedIn every week? Yes, no, right? If no, what went wrong? Does that content, so is it reaching, do we get early qualitative indicators that show that what we're doing is working? Like, do the right people like our stuff? I would think about metrics around that. So really just, are we publishing consistently? And is there some resonance in the marketplace? That will be my earliest phase. And then in the middle phase, we can start measuring a bit more of is what we're doing bringing leads back to the business or interest back to the business? So that's where you get into web traffic, on-page conversions, maybe number of leads generated and so forth. That's stage 2. And now to your point, Ash, we're probably already half a year in, right?
Mm-hmm.
I would say stage 1, after 3 months, if you're posting every day, every week, whatever the thing is, and you don't get qualitative feedback from the market that indicates that what you're doing resonates with the audience, bad signal. But let's presume you know what you're doing, stuff's working well. You should have that signal by then. Okay, it's a couple more months, and then you should start seeing conversions, so you can measure that stuff. And then to your point, before you enter stage 3, where you really look at how many opportunities did we create based on our marketing efforts, how many of those converted, all that stuff, which we talked about in previous episodes. Yeah, that's a year probably, easily, right? So that would be my 3 stages thing, is like set out, measure you're doing the right stuff, then start measuring how it drives conversions, and then start really looking into the quality of those conversions and what is the stuff that actually brings business and what doesn't and so forth.
I think we've got to combine what both you and I just said. Like basically you start with like what's the cost of effort, the cost of infrastructure, and then set that as your base capital that you've invested into marketing. Then you look at like, the conversations generated in the market. That's the sales conversations. That's the point where you take the first feedback loop back to see what's working, what's not working, to improve your marketing effort. From there, the next measurement would be like the sales conversion. So you basically need to look between the conversations and the conversions to see what helped from conversation to conversion, what didn't help. Again, it improves back into the marketing funnel to improve your material and everything. Once you've had the conversion, first stage of the deal and everything, then that's where you do the upsell and stuff. Then again, converting back to marketing to make sure your things are improving and everything. It's basically like this. Just think about it like this one cycle. The second one connects to the big cycle. Third one connects to that cycle. Absolutely. And then it goes into the next stage of like deal progression. I mean, the various, like implementation and closing the next deal, so on and so forth. So each step has to be like a cycle, because you will be dealing with multiple clients going through the, various stages of this while you're still pushing out most things. So look at each one of them individually and look at them collectively to start measuring your true marketing effectiveness. But to get to this point, it will take time, but you have to remember to keep measuring, to keep iterating and improving. It's like most of the people who are listening to us are not just marketers, but also people in the business who probably have lots of experience with like coding and stuff. Think about it like multiple subroutines and programs. Basically, you just keep repeating the whole cycle and iterating and adding step changes to make sure that the thing improves. It's always a step improvement, and each step needs to be measured, because unlike a fixed subroutine, which basically just executes infinitely, here there's room to iterate, improve, reduce lines of code, and make it very, very efficient.
Yeah. And that would be a nice place to end it. But you said 2 things which I want to go back to, because there's a very, very important points, I think. One, you said you got to look at the stuff collectively, which I think that's very true. Sometimes my clients at least come to me and ask, we participated in this and that event, and what was the contribution to revenue by that particular event? And sometimes there are ways where you can measure it, right? Where you can assign dollar values. An event is actually a bad example, because there it's kind of you could kind of find feasible ways to connect that to revenue directly. But
events are good and bad as an example, Flo. Just want to add, like some events, yes. Like for instance, if you're talking about something huge like Hanover Messe, that's literally a standalone thing that you can measure. But if you're looking at like hey, I gave a webinar, that's not really.
I think that, thanks for the webinar, because that's getting closer to my point. Is it's not what we're talking about. It's not assign a dollar value in terms of revenue for each blog post, each webinar, whatnot. You will not do that. But what Ash said, which is look at it collectively, right? Okay, marketing investment for the year have been this and that, and incremental increases in revenue have been so on and so forth. And then you that's the way to look at it, is sort of aggregate business level metrics are what you're going at in the last stage. But that I think was important. And the second thing you said, which is very important, is the stuff takes time. Mm-hmm. And I said within the first 3 months you should get early signals back whether or not that's working. That's just the stage 1, right? Where you build out, where you measure, where you get into the game of doing things consistently, making sure it's good. But for the later stages, before you get to revenue, these are more complex systems And everybody who's ever run a website and done conversion optimization on site knows that there's a lot of time. Like the month you start this is not going to be the month where you get back good results or feasible results even. That stuff takes time. So you've got to build until your system. I said earlier, I said a year. I'm taking that back. I think for most firms, it's probably longer than that before the system is proven out to a point and so stable that you can say, okay, the results I'm getting back now are valid, and we are able to make good decisions based on what's coming back here. Because there's going to be glitches early on, sometimes stuff gets misattributed. There's all kinds of complications that I don't want to go too deep into it. But what you said is very right. That stuff takes time and you need patience. But then, and I think that was the best point at the end, you said there, these are not excuses for not doing it, right? You got to get in there and build the system and improve it, because you have to measure that stuff. And that's not, let's be clear, the takeaway from this episode shouldn't be that, revenue aligning marketing revenues only for the pros. No, that's not what we're saying. We're saying everybody should be doing it. It just, you got to take some.
It takes time and to get you're not going to see immediate results. Yeah. So I think that was a rant and like some counsel, but that is good for this week, I suppose.
Great. In that case, I wish you a happy Friday, and I'll stop the recording here.
Thanks for listening to Unbillable Hours. If you want more, tune in next week. You know where to find us.